Michel Foucault, Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. Delve into the depths of Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison, and witness the transformation of punishment from a brutal public spectacle in pre-modern times to the modern prison system that focuses on reshaping hearts and minds of criminals. Foucault masterfully unravels the philosophical, political, and historical factors that led to this shift, exploring the impact of disciplines, surveillance, and changing power dynamics on the development of prisons. Be prepared to question your assumptions about the evolution of imprisonment as a merciful alternative within this eye-opening analysis.
Punishment's evolution, from pain to soul. The horrific spectacle of public execution, as witnessed in the case of Robert François Damiens in 1757, dramatically changed by the turn of the 18th century. Punishment evolved from a public display of sovereign power into a more covert, bureaucratic practice, focused on reforming the criminal's soul. Instead of brutal dismemberment and torture, the penal system adopted a timely, structured schedule as seen in Léon Fauché's rules for a Parisian juvenile prison. The transformation shifted the emphasis from inflicting corporal pain to influencing the hearts and minds of wrongdoers, sparking debate on whether this evolution truly represents a more humane approach to punishment. Public execution, in its most gruesome forms, was a norm in Europe during the 18th century as demonstrated by the appalling execution of Robert François Damiens in 1757. However, by the turn of the century, the nature of punishment altered significantly, diverting from public spectacles of brutality towards a more structured system of discipline administered behind closed doors. An example of this transformative shift in punitive philosophy lies in the codified rules of French politician Léon Fauché in the 19th century. Fauché's detailed timetable for a Parisian house of young prisoners exemplified the new model of discipline, a regimented schedule of waking, working, eating, and learning, replacing the once bloodthirsty mob's influence with a controlled environment. The transformation of punishment reflected a vital change from the expression of sovereign power to the melding of bureaucratic penalties with defined incarcerations and precise scheduling. Pain and physical torment were no longer central concepts in punishing criminals. Rather, the focus shifted towards reformation of the criminal's soul through the mind, heart, and will. While many historians perceive this evolution as a mark of humanity's progress, the author questions this assumption. The purpose of punishment had evolved from merely breaking bodies to penetrating the deepest corners of a criminal's soul, raising the possibility that the new system was not an advancement in humane treatment but rather a more insidious attempt to enforce control. The evolution of punishment. The shift in punishment methods during the late 18th century was influenced by the Enlightenment philosophers who criticized torture as a relic of a barbaric past. Torture was historically considered a controlled science and an essential tool for obtaining confessions in criminal investigations. Consequently, investigation and punishment went hand in hand, with torture at the core of both practices. Public executions served dual purposes. They demonstrated the power of the sovereign and had political undertones, as the law enforcement was seen as an extension of the monarch's will. Thus, a public execution's audience was both witness and enforcer of the sovereign's authority. In the late 18th century, punishment methods experienced a remarkable change. This shift was fueled by Enlightenment philosophers who criticized the practice of torture, viewing it as a remnant from a brutal, uncivilized era. However, in prior times, torture was not perceived as excessively ruthless. Instead, it was treated as a regulated, scientific process, dictating specific procedures and methods to be followed. Torture didn't exclusively serve as a form of punishment. It held a vital role in criminal investigations, since confessions were highly valued, even pressured, which were considered irrefutable proof. As such, judicial torture ultimately represented the pursuit of truth. This belief led to a merger of investigation and punishment, both of which now featured torture prominently. When a criminal faced conviction, public execution fulfilled dual purposes. It addressed the judicial aspect while simultaneously reflecting the sovereign's authority. In this system, every crime was an affront to the monarch, so law enforcement signified the assertion of their might. A ruler could even demand a criminal's death as a public spectacle to emphasize their absolute dominion over the judicial framework. Spectators at these public executions played a crucial role as both witnesses and confirmers of the sovereign's power. The essence of a spectacle relies on its observers, and in this case, the onlookers reinforced the monarch's supreme authority. Intriguing shift in punishment. By the late 18th century, society no longer saw brutal displays of power through physical punishment as acceptable. The focus shifted towards a more humane approach, with an emphasis on understanding the criminal's motives and determining suitable punishment. Investigations became a mix of juridical and scientific processes, with the involvement of psychiatrists and psychologists. Consequently, power transitioned from the sovereign to the public, and crimes started to be considered offenses against society, rather than against rulers. The purpose of punishment evolved to heal the societal wounds inflicted by criminal acts, rather than exhibiting sovereign power. The Classical Age of Discipline. The Classical Age, spanning the 17th and 18th centuries, revolutionized the concept of discipline. This shift favored transforming criminals into docile, productive beings, serving growing industries. The new system consisted of four primary elements: the art of distributions, control of activity, organization of genes, and composition of forces. Gradually, individuals were assimilated into well-ordered social structures, with emphasis placed on their collective contribution rather than individual prowess. The Classical Age ushered in a transformative period that saw the role of discipline evolve significantly. Rather than employing individual punishment as a deterrent, the focus shifted towards molding criminal individuals into docile and productive members of society, capable of contributing to the flourishing industries of the time. The reformed discipline system had four major components. Firstly, the art of distributions involved allocating criminals to specific spaces. It started with enclosing people in places like military barracks, then progressed to dividing them further into smaller, individual sections. Architecture played a role in this aspect, with structures like the monastic cell serving as inspiration. The second component, control of activity, aimed to regulate individuals' actions through timetables. By instilling rhythm, regularity, and repetition, the new disciplinary methods mirrored the organization found in religious institutions such as monasteries. Thirdly, the organization of genes focused on crafting individuals' identities through meticulously designed procedures and activities. Progression within a hierarchical structure was contingent upon participating in a sequential series of tasks, known as seriation. Educational programs exemplify this, with students advancing through levels based on tightly controlled training and examination processes. Lastly, composition of forces sought to govern not just individual activities but also collective behavior. Individuals were considered as parts of an efficient machine working in unison, much like the human cogs in the manufacturing structures that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. In this new model, the emphasis lay on the number of individuals and their positioning within the larger framework, rather than their individual abilities or strengths. The Classical Age of Discipline thus laid the groundwork for a more organized and productive society. Power through discipline. The potent influence of discipline emerges from three main elements: hierarchical observation, normalizing judgment, and examination. Hierarchical observation involves continual supervision and surveillance, as seen in military camps and other institutions. The structures of these establishments have been adapted to various sectors, such as housing, healthcare, and education, in which architecture plays a critical role. Normalizing judgment, on the other hand, focuses on establishing standards in various fields like medicine and education, often with the aid of grades and ranks. Punishment typically involves repeated efforts to meet these norms. Lastly, through examination, individuals are subjected to constant scrutiny, transforming them into cases to be evaluated. This attitude is prominently evident in hospitals and schools, where continuous assessment aims to reinforce established norms. The plague's unintended consequence. Amidst the 17th century plague in Europe, towns implemented strict safety and discipline measures. In doing so, they developed an unexpected system of surveillance and control, a model that inspired politicians to dream of a perfectly governed society. This concept prevailed in the design of the 18th century panopticon, a thought experiment by philosopher Jeremy Bentham, which created a continuous feeling of being watched, leading to controlled and compliant behavior. During the terrifying times of the 17th century plague in Europe, towns would go into lockdown, and maintaining discipline became crucial for safety. Families were ordered to stay indoors, and an appointed official, known as a syndic, secured each street by locking every door. The syndic checked on the inhabitants daily, ensuring they were still alive and well. Reports were passed from the syndic to town officials, and eventually to magistrates, creating a refined surveillance system. Ironically, the turmoil of the disease birthed the concept of a disciplined society under constant watch. This paradigm inspired some townspeople, who went on to become politicians, to envision the creation of an ideal, disciplined society. This sense of perpetual surveillance can be observed in the 18th century panopticon, a thought experiment designed by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham in 1787. The panopticon is a donut-shaped building with a central tower. The tower's windows face the donut's inner surface, while the building is divided into cells that each have two windows, one facing the tower and the other facing outward. The unique design fosters feelings of constant scrutiny among inmates, who behave as if they are always being watched, whether they are or not. This notion departs from the designs of earlier dungeons, casting a light on how control can stem from the mere perception of surveillance. The unintended consequence of the plague had resulted in an advanced system of governance that continues to impact society today. Prisons, punishment and transformation. The emergence of prisons in the 19th century signaled a shift in how society approached punishment. Detention served as a means to deprive criminals of their liberty, signifying an egalitarian mindset in societies valuing individual freedom. Prisons also offered a method to correct behavior, using isolation, solitude, and work as tools for transformative remorse. However, the ultimate goal of this system was not only moral reformation but also molding individuals into disciplined agents of an industrialized society, whether they were convicts or workers. At the dawn of the 19th century, the concept of prisons as punishment for crimes was still a novel idea. This new approach stemmed from societies that acknowledged liberty as a universal right for its full members. Consequently, taking away a criminal's liberty appeared as the most equal form of punishment, with prisons serving as an instrument to enforce it. Imprisonment provided several advantages as a punishment. It could be precisely measured in terms of duration, offering a way to calibrate its severity according to the crime committed. But prisons were more than just a means of depriving liberty. They were also considered as an ideal environment for criminals to reflect on their actions and make moral improvements, transforming them through isolation, solitude, and the weight of their own conscience. Adding to reflection, convicts were given work as a means of fostering character development. But the true intention behind this forced labor remains debatable. The work carried out in prisons bore no economic benefits and seldom taught relevant work skills. Instead, prison labor indoctrinated convicts into the rigid structures of production, turning them into indispensable cogs within an industrialized society. In this manner, prisons not only acted as correctional facilities but also shared a broader objective of shaping all members of society into disciplined and efficient agents that kept the wheels of industry turning. The line between prisoner and worker blurred, as both endured parallel experiences within the ever-expanding machinery of production.
In conclusion, Discipline and Punish unveils the revolution in how societies treated criminals, transitioning from gruesome public exhibitions of power to the private, regimented prison systems which target the souls of convicts. This metamorphosis was influenced by the Enlightenment, identifying a criminal attack as a wound inflicted on society rather than a personal one on the sovereign. The newer system aimed at creating docile, subservient individuals, ultimately functioning to serve industrialized society. Foucault's dissection of the sprawling effects of discipline, surveillance, and architecture leaves us pondering whether true progress has been achieved in the world of punishment.